The planet Aloris 9 was one of those places charted reluctantly and visited even less. Its official classification within the Galactic Cartographic Index was Class Black, a designation used for planets where life thrived in forms too hostile, unpredictable, or violent for standard scientific procedure. A death world, by most definitions, and one not yet fully mapped. Atmospheric scanners identified at least 16 large predators with apex tier threat levels, dozens more with biochemical defenses, and flora that bordered on sentient aggression. Naturally, someone had decided it would make the perfect site for a xenobiology research station. A joint expedition of various alien species engineers, exobiologists. Defense personnel had been dispatched to establish temporary operations on Aloris 9. The base was nestled along a cliffside, overlooking a marshy basin choked with toxic mist. Layers of scanning drones hovered overhead like anxious fireflies, trying to anticipate the planet's moods. Reinforced habitats pulsed with energy shields. Automated turrets tracked everything that moved within a kilometer. They knew what they were walking into, or thought they did. Among the crowd of armored specialists, towering insectoid guards, crystalline data harvesters, and quadrupedal medics, there was one being who didn't fit, a young human girl named Lena. She didn't wear a pressure rig, just a lightweight survival suit with soft carbon mesh. No armor, no sidearm, no drone escort. She moved quietly, spoke little, and spent most of her time sitting cross-legged near the research canopy, watching the terrain. Many assumed she was the daughter of one of the human engineers, an observer perhaps, some odd civilian addition, carried along for reasons known only to bureaucracy, but to the aliens on the team, she was something else entirely. Whispers circled quietly through the command tent. Is she one of them? She doesn't carry a tracker, doesn't even wear reinforced boots. She isn't afraid. No, not afraid. Just waiting. The alien officers hadn't been briefed on her presence. The human delegation had provided no detailed file, no mission role, only that she was authorized for proximity operations, and to be left undisturbed unless necessary. That last line stuck in the minds of the observers. Unless necessary. What, precisely, would make contact with a human child necessary on a planet like this? And the expedition moved out for their first full environment sweep. Lena went with them. The guards were uneasy, glancing often at her small form between their towering exosuits. She didn't wear a helmet. She didn't carry a data slate or take samples. She didn't ask questions. She simply watched the tree stall spindly things with thorn trunks and twitching leaves and listened to the ground. At one point, she knelt and placed her palm flat against the moss. Staying still for so long, a monitor thought she'd passed out. She hadn't. I can hear it, she said without looking up. No one asked what it was. 2 kilometers from the basin. At the edge of a gully known locally as Razor Gape, the sensors began to ping. One drone fell, then another. Vital feeds went silent. No alarms, just abrupt cutoffs. The team froze. Murmured a Cerulean guard, its carapace flexing with stress. The name alone carried weight. A predator recorded in only 3 known encounters, always ending with retrieval teams gathering shreds of armor and dragging back black boxes. It was said to move faster than sensor latency, to kill before thought could register. And the girl was already gone. One moment she was among them. The next, she was standing in the open field beyond the gully where no one had seen her move. There was no fear in her posture, no tension in her shoulders. Her arms were by her sides. Her eyes were on the brush line where something enormous stirred. Up in orbit, Seraphi's relay station had picked up the anomaly and patched into the ground team's visual feed. Commanders, analysts, and threat monitoring. Officers across multiple species gathered around holoscreens to watch. The Threxel was coming, and the girl in S stood alone, unarmed, waiting. The timer on the feed ticked to 2:01. And then she smiled. Asterisk, the smile was small. Not a grin, not a smirk, just a faint, subtle curl of her lips. But it didn't belong in that moment, and everyone watching knew it. It didn't belong in the presence of a predator, not when the Threxel had entered the field. From the tree line, branches shifted in unnatural silence. Even the bird's strange, glass-boned things with iridescent wings had gone still. Perched in the canopy like ornaments frozen in time, the wind, which moments earlier had been rustling leaves and stirring thick clouds of jungle mist, now carried the electric scent of something dangerous. The apex predator of Aloris 9 emerged. It moved like nothing that size should, fluid, quiet, deliberate. Its segmented carapace shimmered with oils that refracted the hazy sunlight, like wet obsidian. 4 rear legs supported its low stalking frame, while 2 elongated forelimbs ended in hook-like talons that had ripped through powered armor in the past. Its head was long and narrow, with no visible eyes-only slits that tasted the air. The Threxel didn't hunt by sight. It hunted by vibration, smell, heartbeat. And it had found one now, a small one. A lone human girl, standing motionless in an open clearing.
Lynn ran up.
"Why is she out there alone?" demanded a Terran tactical. "Officer, why hasn't she moved?" hissed another. "She's frozen. She doesn't know what's coming." A senior xenobiologist adjusted the playback speed. "No, she knows. There was no mistaking it." Lena wasn't paralyzed by fear. Her stance was balanced, intentional. Shoulders relaxed, chin slightly lowered. Like she was in control of her breath, her position, her awareness. From orbit, the senior observers on the Seraphi's relay exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen the Threxel in action before, or at least, what was left in its wake were no survivors of direct contact. No clean data. Only shredded armor, scorched terrain, and biometric feeds that flatlined faster than system alerts could even trigger. "She has no armor," someone whispered. "No weapon." "She smiled," said another. "Who smiles at a Threxel?" The creature had closed half the distance now. Lena hadn't budged. The beast stopped, its limbs tensed beneath it like coiled springs, poised to strike. It shifted its massive weight forward in a slow crawl that was almost reverent, as if confused, puzzled. By the lack of panic, the Threxel was a hunter of instincts. It fed on the predictable patterns of prey, the pulse of fear, the twitch of flight, the stumbling retreat. But this one didn't move. Lena watched it approach like a teacher watches a curious student. Her eyes tracked it calmly, no tremor in her fingers, no shift in breath. At 2:03, it lunged. The camera caught the moment as a blur motion too fast for standard drones to track. The beast launched itself forward in a full-body leap, all limbs extended, claws opened like a pair of blades ready to rip through her soft frame. And then at 2:04 it stopped. No impact, no collision, just the sound of something landing hard on the dirt and staying down. The creature's body skidded to a halt just feet from Lena, its momentum lost mid-flight. Limbs splayed. Head twisted at an angle that suggested trauma violently snapped or crushed. Its sides twitched once, then lay still. Gasps echoed across the command room. From orbit, stunned silence. On the relay deck, one officer dropped the tablet they'd been recording with. No one moved. "What just happened?" Someone muttered. "Rewind it. Slow it down." The footage reversed, frame by frame. At 2 hours, 3 minutes, and 49 seconds, the Threxel was airborne. At 2 hours, 3 minutes, and 50 seconds, Lena blinked. At 2 hours, 3 minutes, and 51 seconds, its spine twisted and mid or no impact visible. At 2 hours, 3 minutes, and 52 seconds, it began to fall. At 2:04, it was dead. No weapon discharge, no visible contact, no sonic burst, just motion, then stillness. The alien guards, positioned just outside the clearing, hadn't even reached her yet. Hadn't crossed half the field by the time the body hit the ground. Lena turned toward them, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. Her smile was gone now, replaced with a look of quiet curiosity, as if they were the anomaly in the equation. She glanced at the Threxel's corpse once, then continued walking back toward the group like nothing had happened at all. Back in orbit, one of the older observers, a gray-skinned elder with centuries of recorded war behind them, finally found words. "That was not a defense mechanism," they said. "No," the Orkai beside them replied softly. That was a warning. They watched the footage again in silence, and though none dared say it aloud, a single question flickered in every mind present. What else do humans keep hidden? Behind a smile? The forest canopy hung heavy with mist as the guards finally reached the edge of the clearing, but they stopped short, weapons raised, then lowered. Slowly, almost reluctantly, none of them crossed into the open. They were trained soldiers, equipped with pulse rifles, motion sensors, and adaptive shielding. They had faced predators on half a dozen death worlds. They were not easily shaken. But what they saw in that clearing didn't match anything they had trained for. The Threxel lay sprawled across the soil, its obsidian carapace cracked like old pottery. A thick, dark ichor seeped from its mouthparts and pooled beneath it, sizzling slightly as it touched the mossy ground. Its neck was twisted far past the limits of its anatomy, not in the way of blunt trauma, but with a kind of brutal, precise violence, as if the spine had been pinched and folded in a single clean motion. And standing just a few meters away, dusting her palms off on her pants, was Lena. The girl's expression was unreadable, more thoughtful than triumphant. She seemed neither frightened nor proud. She looked down at the predator's corpse like someone studying a misplaced object, trying to decide whether it belonged in the environment at all. She turned slightly toward the guards, who still hadn't moved, and tilted her head. "You were slow," she said matter-of-factly. None of them answered. In the orbiting command deck of the Seraphi's relay, multiple species had gathered in absolute silence. The usual background noise of comms traffic, diagnostic pings, and crew chatter had died out completely. Every monitor displayed the same moment: Lena, standing next to the apex predator's ruined body, her hair fluttering gently in the breeze like nothing about her presence could possibly belong to a scene so violent. Commanders rewound the footage again and again. They used thermal overlays, motion analysis, reaction tracing. Nothing made sense. At the instant the Threxel had lunged, Lena had shifted her weight just a fraction. Her right foot turned, her shoulders loosened. Her arms remained at her sides. No recorded contact, no visible force projection, no energy signature. But the moment after, less than 200 milliseconds later, the creature was already mid-collapse. One frame showed its body seizing in midair, its muscles contorting. The next showed its limbs limp, spine curled unnaturally, its trajectory interrupted, as if it had been slammed downward by an invisible force. The sensors picked up no anomalies, no psi spike, no sound burst, nothing. "She didn't touch it," said one observer softly, breaking the silence. "She didn't have to," another whispered. Further analysis only deepened the confusion. The Threxel's internal readings, captured by internal probe drones deployed days prior, showed a sudden and complete severing of spinal neural conductivity, instantaneous, as if something had bypassed every layer of its armor, every instinct, and turned its own strength against itself. And Lena had stood there barefoot, smiling, like it was all inevitable. The Orkai commander, who had until now remained silent at the back of the observation room, stepped forward at last. Its voice rasped with age and disbelief. "No." She didn't just survive an apex encounter. She ended it on her terms. A junior data technician looked up from his screen, wide-eyed. "Right. What are we looking at, Commander? What is she?" It was a long pause. "Then, she is human," the Orkai answered simply. "But not like the ones we've cataloged." On the surface, the team formed a perimeter around the body. None dared to approach Lena directly. The senior field officer, a Goran named Thav, cleared his throat and attempted professionalism. "Are you injured?" She shook her head. "Do you understand what you just did?" Lena looked at the body, then at him. "It wanted to kill me," she said, "so I stopped it. That was all. There was no boasting, no panic, not even fatigue." She walked back toward the research convoy, brushing a leaf from her shoulder, and left the Threxel behind like a discarded shell. Back in orbit, command personnel began updating planetary risk profiles. Emergency directives were drafted, sealed, and transmitted to core world intelligence. The footage of Lena's smile and what followed after it, was spliced into high-security training modules across the Coalition fleet under a new threat. Category TPH, Behavioral Disparity, Predator Neutralizer. Unofficially, they called it something simpler, something that would spread between officers like myth wrapped in warning. The Smile Protocol. Because now they knew, if a human smiles before the danger begins, the danger is already over. The following hours were a blur of hushed urgency. By the time the corpse of the Threxel had been secured for containment analysis, the research camp had transformed. The air was heavier, not from the atmosphere, but from the weight of realization. Conversations dropped to whispers. Aliens who had once spoken freely in front of Lena now paused when she walked by. Soldiers who had scoffed at her presence earlier now glanced at her with sidelong eyes, then looked away quickly. It's like prey animals pretending not to see the predator nearby. Lena, as usual, remained unconcerned. She sat beneath a twisted canopy, vine just outside the main perimeter, drawing absent-minded circles in the dirt with a stick. Her legs were crossed, and her expression was calm to calm, as if what had happened was neither interesting nor unusual. She'd asked for no treatment, no explanation, no reward, just a small meal and a patch for her torn pant leg, which had caught on a thorn bush during the return hike. In orbit, aboard the Seraphi's relay, a different kind of storm had erupted. The footage from the ground team had been re-encoded, encrypted, and marked for high clearance review. It had already been sent, silently and without ceremony, to Coalition Intelligence, Science Command, and the Deep Threat Assessment Council. None of them could afford to ignore it. The Threxel had long been viewed as a symbol of planetary-scale hostility. Armored, adaptive, and fast enough to disable exosuits before sensors could issue warnings. It was a species that had ended entire outposts. There were planetary evacuation protocols written specifically for Threxel sightings. And yet here it was, laid out on a surgical slab in the Vigilance's containment chamber dead, cleanly without blood spray or dismemberment. The autopsy had yielded no weapon damage. Its spine had been severed at the fifth vertebrae by some force that, according to two separate biology teams, had crushed the bone inward, cleanly, without fracturing surrounding tissue. That wasn't trauma. That was control. Lena's vitals had been monitored the entire time. No adrenal spike. No fear response. Her heart rate had barely climbed above baseline. Her posture, when analyzed frame by frame, revealed no combat stance. No shift in power toward the legs. No lunging. Just that slight foot movement like pivoting for balance. And then, the kill. Even now, hours after the event, her biometric readings showed a girl at complete rest. Not sedated. Not psychotically detached, just at peace. In the debriefing room, tension among the observers cracked like thin ice. She didn't use tech, said a reptilian analyst, dragging claws across a datapad. No implants, no kinetic field. She wasn't even armed. She didn't use anything, snapped another. That's the part you're missing. She just ... did it. A silence fell, and then, as if the room collectively exhaled, a veteran tactician from the Erith species leaned forward and spoke. This isn't about how she did it, he said. It's about what she didn't do. Eyebrows are their equivalent raised. She didn't panic. She didn't posture. She didn't flee. She didn't try to fight it. She simply chose that it would stop existing as a threat, and then made it happen. In that moment, it became terrifyingly clear. Lena hadn't fought the Threxel in the traditional sense. She hadn't responded to an attack, she had preemptively ended it, like someone closing a door, like brushing away an insect. On the planet's surface, meanwhile, the rest of the team attempted to continue their work. But it was fractured and hesitant. No one wanted to assign Lena tasks. No one quite knew how to refer to her anymore. She was just there. A soft-spoken presence in the camp, whose existence now loomed like a shadow over the entire expedition. That night, as a storm rolled over the jungle, one of the defense team men, experienced Igrithy with 12 successful deployments, stood watch at the perimeter. When another soldier asked if she was nervous about the storm or the wildlife, The Agrathi just gestured quietly toward Lena's tent. "No," she said. "I'm nervous because that girl doesn't seem to care." The storm came and went. Uprooted trees, it fried a sensor tower, flooded the lower camp. Lena didn't wake up once. In orbit, the intelligence reports continued compiling. New labels were added to human threat profiles. A closed-loop discussion was initiated among high command. Could this be genetic? Was she unique? Or had the coalition simply misunderstood the baseline nature of Earth's dominant species? One field report concluded with a note flagged in crimson. Priority. Subject Lena displays threat behavior untraceable by standard predictive models. Recommend new classification protocol for human behavior, unlinear, intuitive, and self-authorizing. It was followed by an unofficial message appended by one of the more pragmatic analysts. Forget what they told you about weapons. The most dangerous thing a human can carry is the belief that they don't need one. And somewhere down below, under the dripping vines and steaming earth, the girl who had stopped an apex predator with a glance sat watching beetles crawl across a glowing rock, not because she was waiting for danger, because she wasn't. The morning after the storm, Aloris 9 greeted the camp with a kind of grim beauty. Rain-soaked foliage shimmered under slanted golden light, and steam drifted upward from the heated jungle floor like breath from the planet itself. The devastation from the night's weather was minimal less than expected. A damaged drone mast, a few uprooted tents, and several scrambled data logs. Minor losses, considering the scale of the storm, but no one cared about the storm. The real disturbance had happened hours before it began, and its presence still lingered. Lena emerged from her shelter just as the sun breached the ridgeline, arms stretching casually overhead. Her boots splashed gently through the wet grass as she wandered toward the edge of the main clearing, where the remains of the Threxel had been removed. The team hadn't decided what to do with the body. Scientists wanted to dissect it. The strategists wanted to preserve it for analysis. And the command staff mostly wanted it gone as far away from the girl as possible. No one had touched it without watching her first. Lena stopped at the exact spot where the apex predator had fallen. She stood there for a moment, her eyes scanning the flattened ferns, the faint bloodstain in the soil. Then without a word, she sat cross-legged and picked up a small stick. The motion was eerily similar to what she'd done before the encounter, like she was waiting again, or repeating something only she understood. One of the guards, a thick-shouldered Drelii named Kor, approached her cautiously. He wasn't afraid exactly, but his posture had shifted. His weapon was slung backward, and he kept his hands visible. "You all right?" he asked. Lena nodded without looking up. Kor hesitated. "I saw what you did. Back there, the way it just stopped." She looked up then, and her expression was so calm, so impossibly unfazed, that it made the alien's throat tighten. "It stopped," she said simply, as if explaining a routine outcome, "because I didn't let it continue." Kor didn't understand the words, not fully, but he understood the certainty in her voice. There was no bravado in it, no childish pride. It was the voice of someone who had encountered absolute danger and found it lacking. From orbit, the Seraphi's relay was no longer just observing, it was watching. Every movement Lena made was tracked, cataloged, and filtered through layers of analysts now working in shifts. Every facial expression was cross-referenced with known human psychology databases. Every breath was monitored for shifts in heart rate, stress levels, intent, and none of it helped. She was unreadable. Reports flooded in from research bases, intelligence enclaves, and allied military ships, each requesting access to the footage, each demanding further data on the Deathworlder entity from Aloris 9. The Coalition had made a critical error. It seemed not in underestimating humanity, but in assuming their danger came from strength. It didn't came from subtlety, from the things unsaid, from the ability to smile before the storm, inside the Vigilance's containment lab. The Threxel's autopsy continued. The injuries defied known classifications. The spinal trauma alone suggested crushing force in excess of 10,000 newtons, but with no bruising around the impact area. Bones had compacted in on themselves, not broken outward. Ligaments had been torn in a single direction, as if every muscle in the creature's body had locked up at once in response to a signal that hadn't come from the outside. A theory formed, not publicly, not officially, but it began to spread. In hushed conversations, that Lena hadn't physically overpowered the predator. She had interfered with it, directly, like something hardwired into her biology had told the predator to shut down in it. Obeyed, whether that command came from muscle, mind, or something deeper. No one could say. One veteran analyst, a pale, near-retired Alari with no patience for mysticism, put it this way: whatever humans evolved on Earth, it's not just to survive. It's to end threats, not eventually, not tactically, immediately. Like nature built them to make fear regret being felt. In the days that followed, no one questioned Lena's place in the expedition anymore. She walked where she wanted, asked no permission, and was given no nod out of deference, but out of instinct. The way you might step aside for lightning if it wanted to pass through you. She visited the edge of the jungle every morning.
Oh.
She stared into it, unblinking, as if daring something else to come out. Nothing ever did. One evening, the lead Zen anthropologist approached her with a tablet and a carefully worded question. "Do you know how you did it?" Lena looked at him and smiled again, that same gentle, terrifying curve of the lips. "I didn't," she said. "It just knew." The anthropologist returned to the science tent and filed no report. Could he write? Back in orbit, the command deck had already prepared a reclassification memo. The incident would be sealed, the footage encrypted. A new entry would be added to the Coalition's threat database, but without identifiers or explanations. A code. Subject: L classification. Silent apex. Status: non-aggressive. Engagement directive: avoid provocation. Observation only. There would be no announcements. No headlines. But every command officer across the sector would remember the footage, and none of them would ever forget the time stamp. 2:01, she smiled. 2:04, the predator was dead. Asterisk, they brought her in without sirens. No grand entrance. No parade of armored escorts. No glowing chains of containment, or field cages humming with energy. Just a quiet transport shuttle gray, scuffed, unmarked, touching. Down on the landing platform of the Seraphi's Relay Orbital Station, with barely a whisper of thruster noise, a ghost of a ship for a girl who had become a legend before her 15th birthday. Lena stepped off the ramp with a light. Backpack slung over one shoulder and her boots still. Marked with the red soil of Aloris 9, she blinked once at the brilliance of the station lights, looked up at the massive curved glass dome overhead, and then casually adjusted the strap across her chest. Her expression hadn't changed. Not since the moment she'd ended the Threxel with no weapon, no movement, no fear. That same gentle calm remained unchanged, unburred. Waiting for her was not a welcoming party, but a delegation of silent observers from over a dozen species. They stood in a line along the hangar wall, all trained in advanced threat assessment, most of them having led at least one planetary security operation. And yet every one of them took half a step back when Lena's eyes passed over them. Because she looked aggressive. Not because she glared. Because she didn't react at all. And that somehow was worse. Her data slate had already been purged of standard classifications. She no longer fit under human Earth origin. That folder had been archived. A new one had been created. File, type, _ anomaly designation, silent apex interaction rating. Observe only, no provocation assessment tags, nonverbal lethality, event suppression, undefined predatory resistance in the weeks following the Aloris 9. Incident footage of the Threxel death had not leaked. It couldn't. The Coalition had sealed it under Red Watch protocols, used only for planetary extinction-level encounters and forbidden technology breaches. And yet, whispers had already spread beyond the secure channels. Tales of the girl who smiled had reached black market comes, intermilitary banter, and elite tactical training simulations. It became a phrase used half-seriously by soldiers in tight situations. Smile protocol, guys if she grins, were gone. Commanders rolled their eyes till they watched the footage. When the recording played at quarter speed 2 hours, 1 minute and 3 seconds, 2 hours for minutes and 19 seconds, it became clear that no known reaction model applied. The Threxel had died in the middle of its attack, its entire body collapsing like a marionette with its strings cut. No defensive motion, no pain reaction, no tracking error. Lena never moved, not a finger, not a toe. In the post-incident evaluation room, a panel of psychological analysts had asked her directly, "Did you control the predator in some way?" She had shrugged. "I didn't need to." Another had asked, more cautiously, "Did you understand what it was going to do?" "I didn't need to." An Orkai ethics officer, one who had once written policy on preemptive defense, had leaned forward and asked, "Then what did you do, Lena?" She smiled. Not widely. Just enough to make the room noticeably colder, even though the temperature hadn't changed. "I reminded it," she said softly. That was the moment the panel ended. Back in the upper decks of Seraphi's relay, a senior intelligence director named Hallen, veteran of the border conflicts and known for his skepticism of human mythology, stood alone in the data archive chamber. He had watched the footage 12 times. He had run it through prediction algorithms. It tested for telekinetic impulses, nanobot activity, pulse wave interference. Nothing. She had simply stood there, then it was over. In his private log, Hallen wrote, "I thought I had seen the worst the galaxy could offer. I was wrong. The worst is not rage or madness or fire. The worst is peace so absolute that it bends death around it." The Coalition prepared contingency plans, as they always did. They floated the idea of containment, study, of dissection if required, but no one signed the orders, not because of ethics, because no one was willing to be the first name on the paper. When Lena was assigned quarters aboard the station, she was not guarded. There were no locked doors, no need. The security personnel refused to walk past her hallway twice in one shift. Cameras in her room showed nothing unusual, just a girl reading, writing, sometimes sleeping. But when reviewed later, every recording came with a flicker in the feed, no glitch, just static, as if the machines themselves hesitated to keep watching, and so she stayed. No longer a guest, not quite a prisoner, something else. In quiet. Rooms filled with murmurs and decisions, the final consensus was not spoken. Only understood. She would not be studied. She would not be challenged. She would be left alone. Because what they now feared most wasn't what she had done, but what might happen if they ever made her need to do it again. Asterisk, the name Lena never appeared in any official documents again. From the moment she was transferred to the Seraphi's relay, her existence became a shadow stitched into the fabric of Coalition secrecy. The girl who had smiled at 201 and brought death by 204 was no longer referred to by name, but by designation only, Silent Apex, a title that slipped like static between the lips of those who dared speak of her. She was no longer a person in the eyes of the galactic hierarchy. She had become something else. A variable. A question. A quiet reminder that death need not announce itself with a roar. Time passed. The incident on Aloris 9 faded from the surface level. Chatter of Coalition bureaucracy, buried beneath war reports, territorial disputes, and political theater. But in the deeper straight-aware war, councils met in quiet. Halls and Black Ops strategists wrote simulations that would never see sunlight. She was still there. In war games, a new protocol emerged. It wasn't taught openly. It wasn't listed on any syllabus, but in advanced military academies. It circulated among instructors with the same weight as ancient doctrines. If she smiles, it's already too late. The phrase became a code whispered in darkened training halls, a warning turned mantra. Even among seasoned soldiers, those who had faced planet killers and void-born anomalies, her presence carried weight. The girl hadn't been declared a weapon. She had become a phenomenon. On her second month aboard Seraphi's relay, the station's AI monitoring suite began returning unusual reports. Power draw spikes brief, barely measurable, originating from sections of the station where Lena passed. No outages, no malfunctions, just disruptions. Electromagnetic fields bent subtly around her as if reality itself was hesitant to touch her directly. When technicians tried to recalibrate the sensors, the systems worked perfectly till she entered their radius again. Then static, flicker, silence. It wasn't malfunction, it was avoidance. By her third month, several species requested her relocation quietly, diplomatically. They cited sensitive projects and cultural incompatibility. The truth was simpler. Proximity to her presence made them uneasy, not because of something she did, but because of something they couldn't define. She was polite, calm, curious even. She asked questions about the station's engines, about star maps, about the food replicators. She smiled often. Not the weaponized smile of the jungle, but a soft one, human, warm. But no one ever asked what she felt that day on Aloris 9. No one dared. The data analysis teams, still poring over the incident, had exhausted every rational angle. Physics, neurology, evolutionary stress patterns. One report ventured into the speculative. It's authored anonymously. There are organisms that adapt by growing claws, teeth, armor. And then there are those who adapt by understanding how to break the world's rules. The girl did not win by strength or speed. She won because the universe paused and asked, "Is this something we should allow?" Meanwhile, across the coalition, the impact rippled. Predator classifications were revised. The Threxel, once at the top of the Apex Index, was marked as neutralized by human exceptional case. Recruitment into human forward military. Operations spiked. Alien species once hesitant to work with Terrans began requesting joint operations quietly, carefully, always with small print. No minors, no unarmed observers, no Type L personnel. And still, she remained aboard the relay. Quiet and alone. By choice, they offered her luxuries. She refused. They offered her simulations, training, command. She declined, not because she didn't understand the implications, but because she didn't need any of it. She was never trying to prove anything. One day she stood before the massive viewing window of the station, watching a blue dwarf flare in the distance. A science officer passed behind her and hesitated, unsure whether to speak. "You've become quite the symbol," he said gently. She didn't turn around. "I didn't mean to," she replied. "That's what makes it worse." That evening, the final report on the Aloris 9 encounter was archived under full restriction. Only 5 individuals retained clearance. The last page of the file, appended by an old coalition war strategist, contained no data, just a single, handwritten line, translated into all official languages. Some weapons are forged, others are born smiling, and across thousands of light years. In forgotten corners of the galaxy, where apex predators still stalked, a new hesitation crept into the wild. Ecosystems shifted. Creatures sensed a change in the hierarchy, not through instinct, but through ancestral memory. As if even evolution itself had decided to rewrite its rules. Not because of a war, not because of fire, because once, in a quiet jungle clearing, a girl smiled, and death stopped moving.